October 31st, 2024. It was a dark and stormy night. The Halloween festivities invited all sorts of ghouls, specters, and revenants into the world of the living, looking to jump scare the masses with their spooky demeanor. However, perhaps the biggest jump scare that day came from Nintendo, with the release of the Nintendo Music app. Also, I don't remember if the night was stormy, I made that up. Yeah, it's already been a year since this big red blob on your phone got released. We're getting old. You know, the release of the app was actually closer to the first moon landing than today. Don't fact check that. The Nintendo Music app launched on October 31st, 2024, featuring many soundtracks from Nintendo's vast library of games for people to listen to. I imagine that the rational person's response to this release was to tinker around with it for a couple days before uninstalling. However, I am not rational, nor a person. As a fan of video game music in general, I took particular note of this app and chose to use it the way Nintendo intended throughout its first year. I walk around with my Bluetooth headphones on my university campus listening to its various tunes, before promptly switching to Spotify when someone is close enough to see my screen, so that I can pretend that I'm listening to music that is only slightly less cringe. But whatever, the cringe we shall embrace. I listen to every single soundtrack as they released weekly, alongside curating my own silly little playlists that I obviously never use. I've been with this app through thick and through thin. I'm like this guy from the commercial listening to the Wii Shop channel in the supermarket. Except less sexy. I gave you my life, multi-billion-dollar company that doesn't care about me and would sell me for a penny. And what do I get in return? Glue Glue Land? So, needless to say, I have obtained a lot of feelings on Nintendo Music over the year that I would like to share with you by reviewing the app 1 year after its release. This review isn't going to be incredibly coherent. I'll go over facts and personal experiences pretty much interchangeably. Imagine you're my therapist and I'm trauma dumping to you. That analogy makes more sense. Insert cool transition into title card here. If I want to review the app fairly, I think the most important thing is to judge it based on if it has actually realized its goal over this past year. Therefore, I want to ask this question. What is the goal of Nintendo Music? Nintendo obviously made the app with a certain purpose in mind, but this company's business decisions can be so ridiculously enigmatic that it's hard to pinpoint whatever the hell it's thinking at any given time. My first assumption is that Nintendo Music was made to provide an official way to listen to high-quality music from video games published by Nintendo. If you look at it like that, then Nintendo Music is a pretty good app. It's not only an official way to listen to Nintendo's vast library of tunes that doesn't rely on third parties ripping the songs from the games as files, it also provides many quality of life options. Of course, it has the basic features that any music streaming service has, such as being able to save songs to playlists, shuffle them, or loop them. However, Nintendo Music also has some other nifty options. The ability to extend tracks up to 60 minutes is awesome. It shows that Nintendo recognizes that many people like to listen to their songs on repeat, and this feature thus gives those people good customization options. It's also something that is very unique to video game songs, as most of them loop like this in-game as well. You can't really do this on other music streaming services. Listening to extended versions of songs is more of a thing of the past for me personally, but I do occasionally use extended tracks if I really need to lock the fuck in for an assignment. I recommend Drawing Board 3 from Mario Paint for extensions, by the way. You can also set a so-called sleep timer, which makes the app stop playing songs after a certain amount of time of your choosing. It's of course a useful function for you if you fall asleep while listening and so can't stop the music from playing yourself, but you could also use it as a timer while studying. I'm sure somebody uses the Nintendo Music sleep timer tool for the Pomodoro technique. Surely there's at least one. The app also has loads of pre-prepared playlists. Each time they upload a new soundtrack, they also include a bunch of game-specific playlists that feature certain aspects of the game. Wanna listen to all of the Tomodachi Collection Mii musical numbers back to back? Well, you're weird, but you can. Besides those, they've also got playlists for specific scenes across games, such as boss themes, playlists that feature songs tied to a certain character, like WrinklyCon, and playlists based on a certain mood, like autism. The scene and character playlists are more so novelties if anything. I imagine that the character playlists only exist because they wanted to make playlists for all of these Splatoon bands, and then had no idea what else to use this mechanic that they just created for. So they just threw random shit at the wall. But the developers' dedication to updating these playlists with every OST added is admirable, honestly. The mood playlists though are very nice to have. I feel like people might actually use these sometimes. And aside from all of that stuff, Nintendo Music also has a lot of small little things that reveal the passion of the developers, which I really like a lot. Each song has a picture that depicts the in-game events when the song usually plays. You're able to search through the OSTs based on their release dates and console. You can block songs that would be spoilers if you haven't played the game yet. Thank God. And the songs are just high quality in general. The audio files that people rip from the games themselves are most often lesser in quality than their OST versions that you can find on published CDs like the Splatoon series, for example. That's because those audio files have to conform to the audio quality that the console allows. Nintendo Music doesn't have that problem, so you can expect most songs to sound very crisp. I say most because some songs still have issues. You can watch this video by Dublin Caliph if you want to learn more, but for the most part the songs are high quality. It's impossible to deny that Nintendo Music indeed provides an official way to listen to high-quality music from video games published by Nintendo. And if that's its main goal, then I'd say it's succeeding. But it's of course very likely that that's not the app's only goal. So here's assumption number 2. The app doesn't just want to be an official way to listen to the music, it wants to be a good alternative to other streaming services that host its music, most notably YouTube. You cannot talk about Nintendo Music without talking about its competitors. Nintendo has consistently employed a scorched earth policy against rippers who dare to upload their music online, with heavy takedowns of certain soundtracks or sometimes entire YouTube channels. My own playlists have certainly taken big hits as a result.
What? It's just an ordinary crabby. Oh my goodness!
With that in mind, it's very likely that Nintendo Music exists to give people an official alternative to YouTube. So, does it also succeed in this goal? No. Like, okay, it's not like Nintendo Music is strictly worse. Again, the sound quality of its tracks is usually better. It also still plays music when you're not specifically inside of the app, and it doesn't play ads. Both things that you'd need YouTube Premium for. Okay, for that last one you could just use an ad blocker, but look, it's the thought that counts. But those things really have nothing on the sheer convenience that YouTube offers. It also outperforms many of Nintendo Music's own features that I just praised. Want extended versions? Well, they're less customizable on YouTube, but they're there. Hell, I can even make them myself. What makes you so special? Want mood playlists? There are so many of those on YouTube to the point where I've got over 100 of those saved at the time of me recording this. If I want to listen to Autism, I'll just tune into the latest Teller Chic mix. That one has a much larger variety of songs. Want character playlists? Why do I need to listen to the Vivian playlist when Ariel already has the video game music gay list? There's just no point. Want a sleep timer? Simply press the pause button while you're asleep. Okay, maybe that one's hard to replicate. Listen, I am probably one of the biggest Nintendo Music believers. I genuinely see a lot of merit in the features I just brought up, and there are certainly people who prefer Nintendo Music for those features. However, those people are a minuscule minority, and even I have to admit that when push comes to shove, YouTube can shove. And there's one major advantage of YouTube that Nintendo Music struggles with that I haven't brought up yet. The quantity of songs. At the time of me recording this, Nintendo Music has a bit more than 100 soundtracks. An impressive lineup before you consider that more than a quarter of those are fuck-ass NES games with a singular minute of content each, but impressive nonetheless. And then YouTube has everything. Nintendo Music has a puny selection in comparison to YouTube because YouTube has thousands of people willing to upload game rips of the most obscure games out there, while Nintendo probably has like a group of 5 overworked interns running on 5 mugs of coffee and 1 banana each. This is what I imagine the dev team of the app looks like. Those people simply cannot upload more than what is already or will be on YouTube. Sure, it is a really big company, but last time I checked there are like a lot of YouTube users. The only thing that Nintendo Music has over rippers in terms of quantity is that there are some OST versions that don't sound the same as the in-game variant that people rip. Take Splatoon 3's OST as an example. Actually, I'm gonna take Splatoon 3 as an example a lot throughout this video because I have a very healthy relationship with that game. Some battle songs like Candy Coated Rocks have an ending that you can't hear in-game because the song is supposed to keep looping throughout the whole match. You can't even hear it in the game's sound test. Also, in a single-player campaign, whenever you load into a level, there are a couple songs that can play in the waiting rooms, but they're filtered as if they're coming from a speaker. In Nintendo Music, however, these tracks are unfiltered, since that's how they appear in the OST release Splatoon 3. So like, those little oddities are cool and all, but they obviously don't make Nintendo Music more worth it in terms of quantity. I mean, hell, you could even flip this logic. Splatoon 3 rippers have uploaded certain phases or alternative versions of songs separately from their normal counterparts, which don't appear in the official OST releases. Whichever way you slice it, Nintendo Music is doomed to have a less quantitative that word, a less quantitative library of music than YouTube or any other gripping platform. And most of the time, people blame this on the dreaded drip feed system, which works similarly to how Nintendo handles the Nintendo Classics of Nintendo Switch Online. The app gets updated weekly, usually by adding one soundtrack, which isn't a lot unfortunately, so it means that Nintendo will pretty much never catch up to YouTube when it comes to sheer quantity. Now, I actually think the drip feed system is fine. I don't have an inherent problem with it. Again, Nintendo Music is never going to be able to stand up to YouTube when it comes to quantity, so I don't think there's a need to upload loads of soundtracks constantly. Instead, the drip feed system allows me to properly enjoy each soundtrack as they come out. I probably would have never cared about the Golden Sun OST if it wasn't the only new thing I could listen to for a week, and so I now have a newfound appreciation for it. No, my problem with the system isn't the drip feeding itself. It's something else, something more mysterious. And to make that something else more clear, look at this graph. Sorry, graphic design is merely my passion. The graph shows the combined runtime in minutes of all songs added each week, with the weeks on the x-axis and the runtime on the y-axis. I felt like displaying runtime was more important than displaying the amount of songs, because I think it's a better representation of the amount of content you get each week. Just look at when they added those 26 fuck-ass NES games. The amount of songs might look impressive, but their combined runtime is abysmal because they all sound like this.
Up, down, left.
This was the worst update. What you'll immediately notice about this graph is that it's inconsistent. One week I'm enjoying a lavish gourmet of Sword and Shield, and the week after I get Kid Icarus Ice Soup. Long soundtracks are uploaded at the same rate as short soundtracks, and modern soundtracks are uploaded at the same rate as old soundtracks. This consistency ironically leads to a huge inconsistency in the quality of the OSTs each week. And that is my problem with the drip feed system. Not the system itself, but the inconsistency in which it is employed. God, that sounded so smart, hell yeah. I particularly remember the grueling 5-week stretch between Golden Sun and Kirby and the Forgotten Land in which barely anything of substance was uploaded. Sure, Super Mario Bros. 3 soundtrack is iconic, but it's short, as are all of the other ones. And all of them but Street Pass Me Plaza have quite old sound fonts. By the time we got to the 5th week, I was in class and forgot that I hadn't checked the app yet. And when I found out they added old-ass versions of Tetris and Dr. Mario, I wanted to throw my phone out the window. Thankfully though, they brought me back by uploading literally my favorite video game soundtrack alongside what is quite possibly my favorite video game song of all time. Wait, what do you mean there's only 23 songs available? Ah yes, here we find the first of many, what I like to call, Nintendo Musicisms. Uploading incomplete soundtracks. I assume that the reasoning for this was that they wanted to celebrate the game's 3rd anniversary, which was at that time in March, and so they had to rush it out because they couldn't prepare for the full release ahead of time. But only getting 23 songs from my favorite video game OST after 5 weeks of Ice Soup was tragic. I was like the Joker that week, honestly. You wouldn't understand my pain. Thankfully, we eventually got the full OST in August, a couple days before the release of its DLC, Starcross World. Wait, we didn't get the DLC tracks either, did we? Great. Yeah, so the DLC got announced like a week after we got those 23 songs in March. So I saw people online speculating that the reason why we didn't get everything was because they were waiting on the DLC to come out. And then they would also add the DLC songs alongside the rest of the base game songs. This did not happen. The soundtrack is still incomplete. I have lost all hope. This is not the only example of incomplete soundtracks. It's just that they're usually minor and insignificant. They usually involve small variants of songs that rippers have separate audio files for, but in Nintendo's eyes they don't count as different songs, and that's fine. Like, do I mourn the loss of Mario Kart 8's Shy Guy noises in Shy Guy Falls? Well, yes, of course, I cry about it daily, but like, I'm being really brave about it, you know? However, some of these soundtracks are seriously lacking in music, and just like with Kirby and the Forgotten Land, it's usually because Nintendo doesn't add DLC music. That brings me to Nintendo Musicism number 2. Whether or not they add DLC is inconsistent. The only Street Pass Me Plaza songs on the app come from the 2 base games, Puzzle Swap and Find Me. The other 11 games have been blown to smithereens. Seriously, where is my Market Crashers music, Nintendo? I'm a cis-white male. The stock market is all I care about. And I can't even get the appropriate background music while investing? Horrible service, I tell ya. Then there's also Splatoon 3. Because of course. The Splatoon 3 OST is actually split up into 2 parts. Splatoon 3 and Order Tune, which contains the songs found in its DLC side order, as well as any other extra songs that came out after the release of Splatoon 3. Nintendo Music only has Splatoon 3, not Order Tune, meaning that it doesn't have any side order songs, songs from the special Splatfest like Splatterween and Frosty Fest, songs from the Grand Festival, or any regular song from bands after Splatoon 3. Yoko and the Gold Bazookas, I need you so bad, you don't understand. This is super bizarre because Splatoon 2 does not have this problem despite dropping onto the app later than its sequel. All of the Octo expansion songs, as well as any other song that got added after it first released, are there. And Splatoon 2 is not alone. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Kirby Star Allies, and Pokémon Swish and Sv all have their DLC tracks on Nintendo Music. Hell, they even went out of their way to add the new songs to the Mario Galaxy 1+2 bundle when that dropped on Switch. It's not like they never add new content from the games to Nintendo Music, it's just that they're super inconsistent when doing so. And the inconsistency continues with Nintendo Musicism number 3. Some weeks are just straight up skipped. You might have noticed that in this graph, there are 4 weeks that just do not have any bars. Specifically, these are December 30th to January 5th, after Super Mario 64, May 5th to 11th, after Mario Kart 7, June 9th to 15th, after The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and October 13th to 19th, after Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door and its remake. Hold on to your jovial merriment and Oguri Cup because I am going to extrapolate in excruciating detail why it's very silly that these weeks did not get any soundtracks. My ramblings from this point on will be incredibly incoherent. Please bear with me. So, we can ignore the week after Mario Kart 7 because they did drop a Zelda playlist that week. It's just that it didn't contain any new songs. This is not a substantial alternative, but man, whatever. At least it shows that the devs were alive that week. We could do the same for Paper Mario TTYD as well, since they released a Halloween playlist the week after, but they did announce that they weren't gonna upload anything new the week after, which they didn't do with Mario Kart 7. So there was probably a specific reason for that announcement, and I wanna find out what that reason is. So I'm still gonna include it in this discussion. Now, back to these 3 weeks. If this Nintendo Life article about Paper Mario TTYD is to be believed, the week after it got released was skipped because there was a public holiday in Japan on that day. And the same logic applies for previous weekly updates. That's not very specific, but whatever, we'll roll with it. And by checking this nifty Wikipedia article on the public holidays in Japan, we can verify that, indeed, it would have fallen on the same day as Sports Day, which is on the second Monday of October. Now, the exact day of the week that soundtracks get put on the app varies a lot, add that to the list, but by this point in time, new soundtracks got dropped when it was already Tuesday in Japan, not Monday. Yes, this is a hole in the argument because both the specific day doesn't actually matter because of Nintendo Musicism number 4, so they could have dropped the OST on a day other than Sports Day, and even if we were to look at specific days, Tuesday would have been the day that the OST would have dropped, not Monday. But we're not going to discuss this any further because I'm gonna dig this hole so deep that this will only be a small footnote. Trust me. Anyways, the holiday logic does work for Super Mario 64, because the week after it's literally New Year's. So I'll give him that. But then let's look at Tears of the Kingdom. There is indeed a public holiday on June 9th that could have stopped a new soundtrack from releasing. You know, in 1993. Yeah, no, the logic is already very shaky for Paper Mario in my opinion, and the logic just doesn't hold true for Tears of the Kingdom at all. There are no public holidays in June in Japan. This logic also doesn't make sense because there are obviously other public holidays in Japan that could have prevented a release, but didn't. Fire Emblem Engage dropped on April 22nd and Mario Kart 7 dropped on May 1st. Mario Kart 7 maybe got delayed by 2 days because of Showa Day on April 29th, but it still dropped that week eventually. So if we assume that Mario Kart 7 got delayed 2 days because of a public holiday, why did something like Clubhouse Games 51 Worldwide Classics get delayed by a full week after Tears of the Kingdom? No, unless something super obvious is flying over my head here, I don't think Japan's public holidays matter in this discussion. It's not like if there's a week that contains a public holiday that the devs are like, alright, time to do fuck all on the other 6 days. Okay, from this point forward, let's ignore the week after Mario 64 because the holiday argument makes some sense there, and instead let's focus on the other 2. So, if public holidays cannot explain why these 2 weeks did not get an OST, then let's consider a different option. The soundtracks are so long that we don't need one the week after. And this argument makes sense inherently. Just look at the graph, these 2 are ginormous in comparison to the rest. Now, I actually would say that these high bars are kinda misleading. Paper Mario TTYD has loads of different phases of songs listed separately. They always introduce new instruments, but they all boil down to being the same song anyway. And as for Tears of the Kingdom, half of its songs are just taken from Breath of the Wild, which was already on the app, and the other half are all the exact same piano ambience track that I cannot for the life of me tell apart. But okay, whatever, that's just my personal opinion. These OSTs are still substantive, and like I said, the argument makes sense inherently. It indeed took me more than a week to get through both of the Paper Mario TTYD soundtracks. So surely that means that no uploads the next week is justified. Well, yes, but that kind of brings literally all of the other weeks into question, right? Listen, there was only a 5-day gap between Splatoon and Tears of the Kingdom. So you're telling me that you can upload 4.5 hours of Tears of the Kingdom music in 5 days, and then you take 7 days to upload all of Super Mario Bros. 2, with 8 minutes of music. That makes no sense! It would have made more sense if the week of delay came before Tears of the Kingdom or Paper Mario, not after, because then you could make the argument of, oh, they were just uploading a large soundtrack, so it took a bit more time. But no, this tells me that they're fully capable of uploading a really large soundtrack in just a week. Unless they for some reason trickled in the songs from the large soundtracks over an extended period of time, and just didn't make them public until they were all on the app, which opens up a completely new can of worms that we shall keep firmly closed because I've been yapping about this shit for way too long already. The point I'm trying to make here is that Nintendo definitely could add a lot more songs each week. They've proven that they're able to do it, but they just don't. I'm not trying to be greedy here or anything. I'm not saying that they have to upload something as big as Tears of the Kingdom every week. That would be exhausting. They'd need a 6th mug of coffee for that. But like, they can do better than 8 minutes. I don't need a lavish gourmet every week, I just don't want ice soup, you know? If I had to guess why there's such inconsistency in the combined runtime each week, it's because Nintendo values all of their properties somewhat equally. You know, in the Switch era, they consistently price their games at $60 or euros or whatever, even if some of these games blatantly have more content than others. In Nintendo's eyes, all of these games are quality products that they would never sell at a lower price just because of those differences in content. I assume it's the same for their music. Adding additional OSTs alongside Super Mario Bros. 2 would make it seem like SMB2 is worth less than other soundtracks that get put on Nintendo Music on their own, and they don't want that. This theory doesn't hold up entirely because there have been instances of multiple games being added at the same time, but it's all I can think of for now. Phew, now that I've dug this hole super deep, I can finally take a breather from all of this negativity that I have been spewing. Trying to find a consistent logic in Nintendo Music's upload schedule was perhaps a futile endeavor, considering that the drip feed system of the Nintendo Classics also does not have a consistent upload schedule. But I still think that this whole discussion was worth it, since it adds to the general fragility of the app, which is important to take note of when comparing it to the more reliable YouTube adblocker combo, or Spotify in general. But let's let all of that rest and relish this fleeting moment of silence. Okay, moment over. Nintendo Musicism number 5. They hate new games. So remember when Mario Kart World came out? Of course you do, it was all anybody could talk about in June. And one of the things people talked about was the wide selection of Mario remixes in the game that you could listen to while free roaming. Hell, people even joked that it was an $80 soundtrack with the game as a bonus. So surely, Nintendo must want to advertise their new console with their flagship game by including its beautiful soundtrack on the Nintendo Music application. Let's wait and see. Oh no, that's 7. Carry on. Oh, that's 64. They're not adding it, are they? Well, I guess I'll just rant about Mario Kart 64 instead. Hey, buddy, why do you have the exact same song multiple times in your soundtrack? Luigi Raceway, Mario Raceway, Wario Stadium, and Royal Raceway are the exact same song, silly goose. Why is the same song included 4 times? Why? What was I talking about again? Oh right, scams. So yeah, Mario Kart World never dropped unfortunately. And this ties into the broader theme of Nintendo Music refusing to host the soundtracks of any new games. The most recent game on the app is, again, Paper Mario TTYD Remake, which released in May 2024. I think there's 2 possibilities here. Either Nintendo wants to wait for a certain period of time after the release of a game, say a year, before adding its OST to the app, or they're not adding specifically Nintendo Switch 2 games. Both of these possibilities have holes in them, as usual, but I don't really see the point in either of them anyway. You could say that they're holding off on adding those OSTs because they want people to buy the actual game for them. However, YouTube rips of Mario Kart World exist, and Nintendo isn't doing anything about them, so people don't have to buy the game just to listen to the music. And even if the YouTube rips get taken down, you can go to any other ripping website, or someone else will re-upload it anyway. Besides, I don't think anyone specifically buys games just to listen to their music. Except for the Origami King, surely. God, that OST is a bop. That's not only because the game itself is obviously more important, but also because oftentimes there is no way to listen to the songs on their own in-game unless the game has a sound test feature, like Splatoon 3, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, or Smash Ultimate. Mario Kart World doesn't though, so its remixes are often going to be muddied by in-game sound effects, plus the song that plays is random, so you can't even choose what to listen to. Like what if you wanted to listen to Coconut Mall but you get put into Baby Park Jail instead? Wait, this shit slaps actually, never mind. But even though there's no point in either of them, let's just entertain both of these possibilities anyway, just for the hell of it. Nintendo waiting for some time to add stuff to Nintendo Music can't be entirely accurate because of the aforementioned new songs in the Super Mario Galaxy 1+2 bundle. Admittedly, those are only 3 songs, so adding them probably wasn't that big of a hassle, so perhaps we can get more data on this once they add the Order Tune songs to Splatoon 3. That soundtrack was released in December 2024, so if they suddenly put the songs on Nintendo Music during or after next December, then that's slightly more evidence that they simply wait a year before putting stuff on the app. As for the other option, Nintendo not putting anything from the Switch 2 on the app is also not entirely accurate, because they have. They're just not full soundtracks, instead being labeled special releases and only containing a few songs. The first one was for Kirby Air Riders, which was announced during Sakurai's Kirby Air Riders Direct, serving as a sneak peek for some of the songs in the game because it isn't actually out yet. This is fucking awesome! Unironically. This was the first time that Nintendo Music was the only way to listen to a couple video game tracks. Yes! Let's go! You are finally useful for once! Gosh, they grow up so fast. Now, I actually did see people put these songs on YouTube shortly after, but I checked while writing the scripts, those uploads are gone. Like, they're making sure they're keeping the shit locked down until the game releases. They put out another one after the second Kirby Air Riders Direct, which is also nice. Nothing I can complain about. This is genuinely such a cool way to use this app that I'm surprised it has not been done for other games since. Like for Tomodachi Life or something. Seems like we're off to a great start with these special releases. Now let's check out the other one. Okay, wow, didn't need the death threat. Donkey Kong Bonanza? Really? The game was already out when this released. I can already listen to the whole OST on YouTube. This is just Kirby and the Forgotten Land all over again. They have the capability of giving us the whole OST, but they just don't. At least with Kirby we were promised all of the other songs later, but with Donkey Kong they're like, yeah no, this is all you're getting. Eat shit, heart emoji. So yeah, in conclusion, Nintendo not uploading their newest soundtracks to Nintendo Music doesn't make sense, and the 2 explanations that I can think of for why this is the case both have holes in them. And with that, my list of Nintendo Music-isms is complete. Now, what I'm trying to say here with these isms is not that Nintendo Music is bad because of them. I don't think Nintendo Music is bad at all, contrary to what the thumbnail might suggest. Rather, the isms make Nintendo Music pretty inconsistent and enigmatic, which only makes alternative services like YouTube more convenient. Like I referenced before, it gives me the impression that the people working on the app are probably some overworked interns who have this as a side job, and didn't really receive concrete instructions regarding what they were supposed to do each week. Not saying that that's the actual case, just saying that that's how it comes across, which is not a particularly good thing. I perfectly understand why the lack of songs and the inconsistency of the service would drive people away, and into the metaphorical arms of other streaming services like YouTube or Spotify. That's why I can't in good faith call it a proper alternative to YouTube. And so I think that if being that alternative is its goal, then it's failing. However, I think that the quantity of songs isn't necessarily the issue, because again, Nintendo Music will never surpass YouTube in sheer quantity. It instead needs other features similar to the extensions or the sleep timer to make it worthwhile. I won't list too many possibilities for that here. I think that Biza Bizao, for example, gave a lot of great examples for how the service could improve in her video on the app, so I recommend you watch that if you're interested. But she, for example, talked about including scans of the booklets that you'd find in the published CDs of these soundtracks, or having a sort of radio station that you can tune into, and it always plays a random song from the entire collection. Those ideas are cute, and I think the app would greatly benefit from unique features like that. However, if there is one suggestion I like to highly endorse, it's something quite obvious, and something that people have probably been expecting me to talk about. Please credit the composers. I don't care if Japan is a lot less individualist than the West and so credits individuals less. Not crediting people for their work is inexcusable. The fact that the names of the composers are nowhere to be seen on the app is its worst aspect. Words cannot describe how much I despise the decision or the lack of care to not credit people for their hard work. This is something that regular people on YouTube do. This is information that any website with video game music rips provides. And you're telling me the mega corporation can't? Be serious. Alright, I have finished recording the script on the 25th of October. Hopefully nothing will happen on the first anniversary of Nintendo Music that completely invalidates any part of the script. Ah. They added nothing. Shit.
Give me your attention, baby. I gotta tell you a little something about yourself.